the beginning of the movie we are shown a young boy named Rick. He was looking at weapons at an arms bazaar. Then the seller offered him a Russian-made AK-47 rifle for $200. But Rick did not believe in the authenticity of the weapon. Then he called his father named Richard. And after his father saw the weapon, Richard stated that it was a fake weapon. Then Richard bid on the weapon for $75. Then because the seller lost the negotiation and was worried that his actions deceiving the buyer would be reported, then finally Rick and his father took home the two weapons for $150. Then on the way, the two of them chatted. Richard said that the business of buying and selling weapons illegally like they had been doing so far could not continue. His father said that he had plans to open a business legally and just live normally. And when they got home, they found a car parked in front of their house. Richard, who was worried if it was a bad person, so he immediately took a shotgun. But when they entered the house, it turned out that Rick's sister named Dawn was making out with her boyfriend. Seeing that, Richard immediately went berserk while pointing a shotgun at Dawn's boyfriend. But Dawn did not accept her father's actions and was also angry with her father. On that occasion, Dawn's boyfriend chose to run away. Dawn chased her boyfriend out of the street, until an argument broke out between Dawn and her father. Then located in the basement, Rick and his father were making a silencer for the rifle they had bought. It was done so that the selling price of the rifle could double. Even a rifle that was originally worth $75, once added to the silencer, the price could reach $1,000. Then because of that incident, Dawn was disappointed in her father. She even planned to leave home. One morning, Dawn said goodbye to Rick and said if she was going to live with her boyfriend. Rick warned her not to be rash, especially since her boyfriend was not necessarily willing to take responsibility. But Dawn was already in love and disappointed in her father. She would still go, not forgetting that she also left a phone number if she wanted to contact her at any time. Then when Dawn went out of the house, Richard just looked out the window and did not try to stop her. After that, Rick began marketing the weapons that he and his father had modified. Rick then visited a black child's headquarters. And unbeknownst to Rick, the headquarters was being staked out by two FBI members. Then while inside the headquarters, at first Rick's arrival was not very welcomed because Rick was a white man. Rick then offered weapons that had been modified or given additional silencers. But Johnny doesn't seem very interested. Even he only bid $100 for the two guns that Rick brought. But Johnny's attitude immediately changed when Rick took out the silencer and attached it to that weapon. Seeing this, Johnny was immediately interested in buying the weapon. Rick offered the two weapons for $1,500. But after negotiations, it was agreed that the two weapons were valued at $1,000. Not only that, Rick was also immediately considered a friend by everyone there. Rick was even invited to a nightclub. There Rick also made new friends who were all black. The next day, Rick woke up because there was the sound of several people chatting. After checking downstairs, Rick saw his father chatting with two FBI members who had staked out Johnny's headquarters the other day. The two people named Frank and the woman named Alex. The two people were looking for a gun dealer who sold guns with silencers illegally. It was because the FBI got a lot of cases of illegal use of weapons. After that, Rick was also called in for questioning. He was also told to look at the suspects who had bought the illegal weapons. At that time, Rick saw a photo of Johnny as one of the perpetrators of illegal gun use. But Rick deliberately lied by saying that he didn't know the people in the photo. Then because the FBI members didn't get the information they wanted, they left. Then Rick played with his new friends until night. And when Rick was about to go home, he was suddenly called by someone in a car. Then Rick was told to get in. And it turned out that those who called Rick were Alex and Frank. There was also a drug investigator named Jackson who was handling illegal drug cases. Then they said they needed Rick's help as a spy. They are currently pursuing a kingpin of illegal drugs. Rick was then asked to pretend to buy drugs and find out where the drugs came from. And if Rick wants to do the mission, then Rick will be paid $300. Got the offer, then Rick was willing. Then Rick went to a place that was suspected of being the headquarters of a drug kingpin. There Rick tries to buy illegal drugs. After that, Rick informed the FBI regarding the drug trafficking he knew about. Gradually Rick began to make a lot of money from selling weapons as well as becoming FBI intelligence. On the other hand, Rick also established a good relationship with Johnny's gang who were already famous for their strength. Then one day Rick was invited to Johnny's wedding. Then when he returned home, Rick met a girl named Brenda. Long story short, Rick spent the night with Brenda. The next day, Rick again met with members of the FBI and a drug investigator named Jackson. Now Rick's role as an intel is getting deeper. He was even given 650 grams of drugs to become a dealer to find out the drug network in the city. And since then, Rick's life has been completely unexpected. He has a lot of savings from drug sales, as well as being FBI intelligence. But one day, Richard saw Rick in a car with members of the FBI. Seeing this, Richard immediately went to Rick's room and checked every corner of his room. Then under the bed, he found a box containing $9,782. The money is the result of being paid as an FBI informant all this time. Later, when Rick returned home, his father was waiting outside. Richard immediately said if he saw Rick with the FBI members. Not only that, Richard also said that he found $9,782 in his room. His father really doesn't like it when his son hangs out with the FBI. But Rick tried to argue until Richard got angry and hit Rick. Getting such treatment, Rick was angry and went straight into the house. Then in the night, Rick secretly went in his grandfather's car to a restaurant. Arriving at the restaurant, Rick waited for Don. Rick said that he missed Don. Rick also told Dom that he and his father were fighting. In the middle of the conversation, suddenly the car Rick was carrying was stolen. Rick and Don immediately came out and quickly shot the thief several times, but the car thief escaped. Unfortunately, their actions were caught by two policemen who immediately ambushed them. Then while at the police station, the FBI members who had been working with Rick tried to help Rick get out of the police station. By the police, Rick was suspected of illegal possession of firearms and committed attempted murder. Then after being helped by the FBI, Rick returned home by being picked up by his father. After being released from the police station, Rick came to Johnny's place to meet his friends. But when he came, they all looked at Rick with other gazes. Then Rick was invited to talk 4 eyes with Johnny. Then Johnny asked what Rick did until he was arrested by the police. Rick said that at that time he shot the thief who stole his car. Then Johnny asked if Rick reported Johnny and his group to the police. Rick said that he would not involve Johnny and his friends in the matter. Hearing Rick's words, Johnny believed him. Until one day, Rick was invited by Johnny to Las Vegas. They spent the night there to party and have fun. But unfortunately, all the VIP tickets at a boxing event had been bought up by Johnny's enemies. Therefore, Johnny invited all his friends to watch the boxing match only on television. Then when they were busy watching television, suddenly Johnny's enemy came again and mocked Johnny, who was already neat but ended up just watching on television. Because of this taunt, Johnny's anger peaked. He then took a bottle and hit his enemy many times until his face bled. As a result of this action, the problem became worse. Until one day, Johnny's enemies came to the house of one of Johnny's men, and immediately shot at the house from outside. Because of this, one of the little children was shot. The events that occurred at the house of Johnny's men made the news on television, because it related to clashes between gangs. Rick, who watched that news, was scared, so he went to the basement to get a gun. But the action was caught by Richard. His father also expressed his dislike for Rick having fun in Las Vegas, as well as Rick, who wears a Jewish necklace. Meanwhile, Johnny gathered all his friends together. After the incident, he was angry that his men were killed. But the problem did not end there, but the police and the FBI were also investigating the use and possession of illegal weapons. This made Johnny worried because he owned and used weapons illegally. The series of events made Johnny suspect that there was a police spy among them. Hearing that, Rick was silent. Then on the way home, Rick met with the FBI. But Rick didn't want to be associated with them anymore. Rick was afraid Johnny would get suspicious. And if that happens, then Rick will be in big trouble. Therefore, Rick chose to go away from them. Not only that, Rick also decided to apologize to his grandfather for losing his grandfather's car. Richard also started getting rid of the illegal weapons they had been trading. Then one day, Rick was visited by a friend who was also Johnny's subordinate. Rick offered him a drink. But when bringing drinks from the kitchen, suddenly the man shot Rick directly and hit the stomach. After that, Rick was immediately taken to the hospital. Shortly thereafter, his father followed. At the hospital, there were already members of the FBI who had been Rick's colleagues. Then in front of the FBI members, Richard said if he would take revenge on whoever had shot Rick. Then the FBI said that they already knew that the most likely culprit was Johnny, and this could already be evidence that the FBI would arrest Johnny. But Richard was angry. He felt impatient for revenge. Richard then headed to Johnny's place. Once there, he saw Johnny and his friends. Richard immediately prepared a gun, but he abandoned his intention to take revenge. Richard suddenly remembered the FBI's words that Johnny would be arrested soon. and shooting Johnny at this time was a rash act that might make Johnny's arrest fail. So Richard chose to leave Johnny's headquarters. Gradually Rick's condition has improved, and not long after, the FBI made good on its promise by arresting Johnny and his group. Some time had passed. Then, a little boy came to Rick's house. The child said that he was Brenda's younger brother. The little boy said that Brenda had given birth to a child and the child was Rick's child. Hearing that, at first Rick didn't believe it, because he only spent one night with Brenda. Even so, Rick still went to Brenda's house to take responsibility. Rick then met Brenda. He also saw his little daughter. Not only that, Rick's father also came there and held his grandson. Richard looks happy because now he has a grandson. Then on the way home, Rick and his father chatted about their dwindling financial condition. Currently, they are no longer working as weapons suppliers. Because of this condition, Rick had the idea that he would return to selling drugs. But Richard disagreed with the idea. Then suddenly, in the middle of the chat, they almost had an accident because Richard didn't focus on driving. But fortunately nothing happened to them. Then they lamented the fate that their lives were bad luck. On the other hand, Rick thinks that there is no other way to earn money and save their finances. So Rick insisted on returning to being a drug seller. Here Richard could not forbid his son anymore. Rick then met the drug kingpin he used to know. Rick again started doing business as a drug seller. With the network and market he already knows, Rick can market his goods easily. Then Rick and his father wanted to pick up Don, who had been away from home for a long time. After arriving at the address, they found Dawn in a small, dark room and in a state of addiction. Even though Dawn was not a drug user, but she got addicted as a result of always being given drugs by her boyfriend, and now her boyfriend just left her alone. Rick and his father then took Dawn home. At first, Dawn didn't want to go home and wanted to wait for her boyfriend. But Richard still brought Dawn by force. In addition, Richard also locked Dawn in the room to remove the effects of the illegal drugs used. After a few days, Dawn's condition improved. On the other hand, Rick's business as a drug dealer was growing rapidly. His life is now triumphant again and he has a lot of money again. Rick has been in the business for about a year. It brought him back to hanging out at nightclubs. He even met Johnny's wife. There Rick got information if Johnny was imprisoned for 20 years. But I don't know what Rick was thinking. He even made out with Johnny's wife. After that, Rick went home. In front of the house, Rick's father was waiting. As a parent, Rick's father reminded Rick that he was not greedy in doing the business. Then one morning, Rick, who was joking with Dawn, heard a noise from downstairs. After checking, it turned out that their house was raided by the police. At first Rick didn't know why he was arrested. Then one of them said that Rick was arrested for being a drug seller. In addition, based on the examination, the total drugs that have been sold by Rick so far have reached 8 kilograms. Realizing that his son was in big trouble, Richard then met the FBI, who had been helping Rick. The FBI also tried to help as much as they could, but there was no guarantee that Rick could escape this case, because the amount of drugs sold was too much. Then the FBI offered a way out by offering Rick to return to being FBI intelligence. This time the FBI is targeting the mayor, who has been considered corrupt. Incidentally, that mayor's son is Rick's friend. The FBI asked Rick to pretend to ask his friend for help, with the intention of storing drugs that would be circulated at the mayor's house. Thus, the FBI had a reason to arrest that mayor. Rick, who had no other way but to cooperate with the FBI, then Rick went up to those mayor's daughter. Rick told the woman that there would be a large shipment of illegal drugs, so he needed her help. Some time passed and the case that ensnared Rick had begun to be judged. However, the plan that was drawn up did not go smoothly. Because in the trial, Rick was found guilty of being a drug seller. The FBI's promise to help Rick was also unable to save Rick. Therefore, Richard immediately went to one of the FBI members who once gave a promise. However, the FBI member said that he had tried his best, but the court's decision could not be changed. Richard was not discouraged. He then returned to see an FBI member named Frank. To Richard, Frank said that the mission to capture the mayor had failed. So they could not fulfill their promise to release Rick from the law. Various ways to be free from the law have been taken, but everything failed. Then Rick had to be in prison for life. In prison, the cell where Rick was different from prison in general. He was put into a special cell that was very limited to seeing the outside world. He was only allowed out of the cell for 1 hour per day. Then one day, Dawn came to visit him with Rick's already toddler daughter. They chatted and missed each other. Not to forget, Richard also visited him and the two of them chatted. Richard also continued to motivate Rick by saying that if this was not over, he would try to apply for leniency so that he could get out in a few years. But Rick was tired of all this and said that this was what everyone wanted. Richard still tried to encourage Rick by saying that Rick was far greater than him. Richard also said that he would always visit Rick in prison, and Rick is the longest-serving inmate in Michigan for non-violent cases. In addition, during his lifetime, Rick has also helped the FBI in fighting crime. Then after almost 30 years in prison, Rick finally got parole from the government. And the movie was over. So what do you think about this movie? If you like it, please click like and leave a comment for this video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a video from Allo Recaps. See you next video.